In this video, I wanted to talk about one-handed shooting with a pistol and basically how it's an essential skill. And even this is something I would even practice with a rifle. Some of you may have the strength to lift up your M4 variant, like your AR-15, your 16-incher, or whatever, your carbine, if it's not ridiculously loaded down with heavy metal rails and all these gadgets on the front, which, it's good to have a light and stuff like that. And if you actually have night vision capability, why not take advantage of it? However, anyways, basically, most of this has to do with pistols, and this is more the dry fire section rather than actual range session. But I guess you already saw that I was sitting there practicing one-handed, and of course I did have misses. That's kind of natural when you haven't done it in a while, but there's reasons why I think that it's actually essential to actually practice this stuff, at least practice it. So the first thing is you're not always going to have the luxury of having two hands available all the time. There's plenty of things. Number one thing that I've actually encountered is bracing myself in order to expose myself as little as possible around a barrier. Say, keep my feet out from a barrier, or keep my foot out from behind concealment or cover or whatever. Kind of small potatoes there, but like if I'm in the kneeling or whatever, I might actually have to brace myself, especially if you're wearing gear like a plate carrier or whatever. You might actually find yourself needing to brace yourself while you're going around. You might not have the ability to use two hands, but there are people out there that have actual combat experience, and SWAT officers that have actually done this, and they teach now, or they've given feedback where it really didn't make much of a difference even against a trained opponent who was very focused on fighting back. It didn't really make much of a difference how much they were exposing, but they weren't like hopping out. But anyways, they did find that doing one hand around cover might actually be something you might have to do, especially like if you're working with a shield, but that's not really something that we're necessarily talking about. But the other thing is maybe you're wounded, or it's the fastest way of engaging your target, or you're bracing somebody else, holding on to someone else, carrying something, whatever it is. Maybe you're reloading and you immediately have to put that one round on target if you're just doing a magazine exchange because you want to top off. Whatever the case may be, there's plenty of small reasons. It's unlikely, but it is something that you might want to practice. Maybe give medical aid while you're covering, stuff like that. I've seen that before, where you have medics who are putting pressure on a wound and holding up the rifle with one hand. I have actually seen that happen. So some things that you can actually get out of practicing it, at least the one-handed shooting with each hand support and primary shooting hand. You can get muscle building. You're gripping the pistol as hard as you can, and there isn't really much distribution of force, and so you have to compensate with your primary hand, or that one hand has to do the job too. Also, you're going to be holding out that weight, so if you have a particularly heavy firearm, like a metal frame firearm, then you will have some stress on the shoulder if you're holding it up for a while. So, also, this does force focus, because if you're going to actually pull the trigger without moving the gun, you're not going to have that extra bracing ability, so you actually have to have your finger moving independently to prevent sympathetic movement of these other fingers, which naturally want to support it and leverage and putting weight with this finger. So it does help with muscle building in your trigger finger and your tendons and stuff like that, making them stronger and capable of pulling more. So and it's also, here's the other thing, on the mental aspect of it, it is actually humbling. If you find yourself moving a lot or whatever, you realize that you're not as in tune to the firearm, you're not as strong in your trigger finger manipulations, you're not as strong with your firearm as you thought. So it can be humbling for some people who are a little too focused on one little thing. So one of the methods that I one of the things that I like to do is to kind of vary the different methods and practice all the different little scenarios. So you can practice getting into a fighting stance and, you know, basically drawing and shooting with one hand. You know, there's a lot of things. Practice, you know, high compress ready, so you can basically just go out and extend and fire, or you can do low and stuff like that and then pop up. So you can also do varying positions, kneeling and stuff like that, leaning around, cover, concealment, stuff like that. One of the recommendations I have is to keep your targets small, because this is a big focus on your ability to discriminate any movement, discriminate your fire, and prevent yourself from moving as much as possible. And basically your goal all the time when you're dry firing is to remain as motionless as possible during the course of pulling that trigger. So I recommend practicing varying speeds. Like one thing is basically practicing having your finger straighten off the trigger and then immediately, as fast as you can, pulling that trigger and making sure that you have absolutely no movement. But anyways, you know, without going into much of a rant and you know, kind of tiring you out with this conversation, that's just a little bit of the main points on one-handed practice. At least practice, but I encourage going out to the range and actually verifying these skills. So with all that said, go ahead and put a comment down below on what you think about this, and I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you in another video. You guys have a good one.